In August 1923, a rescue ship finally reached the remote shores of Wrangel Island, a desolate frozen rock sitting 90 miles north of Siberia. They had come to look for 5 people who had been stranded there for nearly 2 years. What they found, they were not prepared for. 4 of the 5 were gone, dead or missing, somewhere in the ice. But one figure was standing on the shore, waiting, thin, alone, but standing. She was 25 years old. She had no military training, no survival experience. She had arrived on that island as a cook and a seamstress. Her name was Ada Blackjack. And this is the story of how she survived, when everyone else didn't. To understand how Ada ended up alone on one of the most hostile places on Earth, we need to go back to 1921. A Canadian explorer named Wrangel Stefanson had a bold idea. Send a small team to Wrangel Island to claim it for Canada before Soviet Russia could. Bold, yes. Well planned, absolutely not. Stefanson chose 4 young men for the mission. Alan Crawford, 20, the Canadian team leader. Fred Maurer, 28, who had survived an earlier Arctic expedition that went badly wrong. Milton Galley, 19, just out of school and ready for adventure. Lorne Knight, 28, strong and optimistic. They needed one more, a cook and seamstress who could also speak English. The job landed in front of Ada Blackjack, a 23-year-old Inuit woman living in Nome, Alaska. Ada had every reason to say no. She was terrified of polar bears. She had never camped a night in her life. She had never held a rifle. She was by every measure the wrong person for this job. But her son Bennett was sick, very sick. He needed medical care that Ada couldn't afford. This job paid $50 a month. She signed the contract. On September 16, 1921, 5 people set foot on Wrangel Island. They carried supplies for 1 year. A relief ship would come the following summer. Simple plan, clean plan, except it wasn't. The first autumn was manageable. Foxes were plentiful. The team was in reasonable spirits. Nobody had yet understood just how badly they had underestimated what they had signed up for. The first weeks were almost exciting. The island was untouched. Wild foxes, seal-spotted coastlines, a sky that never got fully dark in the Arctic summer. The team felt like pioneers. But October arrived. Then November. The Arctic winter did not ease in gently. It arrived like a wall, temperatures crashing to -30, then -40. Blizzards that ran for 3 and 4 days without a break. The relief ship that was supposed to come that summer never made it. 2 attempts, both turned back by pack ice. The 5 people on the island had no way of knowing this. They just knew no one came. Their supplies were shrinking. Their spirits were shrinking with them. And it was during this grinding second winter that Ada Blackjack began, quietly and deliberately, to become someone else. Ada had one enormous advantage over the men. She had grown up Inuit, not on the tundra and not in anything like these conditions, but she understood cold in her body in a way they did not. While the men focused on morale and plans, Ada focused on skills. She was not trying to be impressive. She was trying to not die. She asked the men to teach her how to shoot. She was terrified at first. The recoil knocked her down the first time. She got back up and asked to try again. She learned to set and check fox traps along routes she mapped herself. She studied the behavior of seals on the ice, where they breathed, how long they surfaced, when to take the shot. But Lorne Knight was deteriorating. By the second winter, he could barely walk. His joints swelled, his gums bled, his teeth began to loosen one by one. Scurvy, the ancient disease of people cut off from fresh food for too long. Without vitamin C, the body slowly begins to unravel. Joints, skin, blood vessels, teeth. It's painful and it's slow. Knight couldn't hunt anymore. The 3 other men were struggling too, which meant that Ada, the woman hired to cook and sew, was increasingly the only person physically capable of going out and finding food. She hunted alone in temperatures so cold that metal stuck to bare skin. She lay motionless for hours at seal-breathing holes, waiting. She came back with meat. She kept them alive. Ada's journal entries from this period show something remarkable. She almost never wrote about fear. She wrote about seal behavior, weather patterns, trap placement. She was studying, not surviving. Or maybe, studying was surviving. She also found something she hadn't expected. Competence. The rifle that had knocked her down no longer scared her. The ice that had seemed impassable now had readable patterns. She was learning the island. January 1923. They had been on the island for 16 months, no rescue, Knight bedridden, supplies low. Crawford, Maurer, and Gal reached a decision point. Their plan: walk 100 miles across the frozen Chukchi Sea to the Siberian coast. Get help. Send a ship back for the others. It was dangerous. The ice shifts, cracks could open beneath your feet without warning. Ada refused to go. She would not leave Knight to die alone. So on January 28, 1923, Crawford, Maurer, and Gal loaded their sleds and walked out onto the ice. She watched until she couldn't see them anymore. She turned around. She went back inside. She never saw them again. Crawford, Maurer, and Gal were never found. No bodies, no sleds, no footprints remaining. The frozen sea swallowed them entirely. Two left, Ada and a dying man. Alone on an island the rest of the world had largely forgotten about. Ada did not record any kind of breakdown in her journal around this time. No long entry about fear, no prayers, no crisis. Just January 30. Caught one fox, wind from the north. For the next 3 months, Ada became everything. Knight's nurse, his hunter, his cook, his sole companion. She was 24 years old and she was keeping a dying man alive in the Arctic with her bare hands. She kept a journal through all of it, not to process her feelings. Ada was not that kind of writer. Just facts, weather, what she hunted, what she caught, how Knight was doing. One entry from April 19, wind, hunted, got nothing, will try again tomorrow. That's it. No self-pity, no despair, just a plan for the next day. She was still afraid of polar bears, so she built a watchtower, rough lumber and salvaged planks, on a ridge above the camp where she could see them coming from far away and prepare. She also built a small boat from camp materials and driftwood. She didn't know if it would float very far, but having it felt like having a way out, and that mattered. The boat was never seaworthy enough to really use, but Ada worked on it a little every day anyway. A project, a proof to herself that she was still moving forward rather than waiting to die. Despite everything Ada could do, Knight's scurvy progressed. He lost more teeth. He could no longer sit up without help. He was barely conscious some days. April 23, 1923. Lorne Knight died. Ada was with him. She covered him with a blanket, sat still for a moment, and then stood up. Ada Blackjack was now the only living person on Wrangel Island. No radio, no flares, no way to send a message or signal a ship. She didn't even know for certain whether anyone was planning to come for them. She had two choices: fall apart, which would mean death within days, or keep going, which meant waking up the next morning and treating survival like a job. Her journal entries after Knight's death became even shorter, not because she had less to say, but because she had no energy to waste on anything that wasn't essential. What she didn't write in her journal was almost as revealing as what she did. She never wrote about the silence. She never described how strange it was to hear nothing but wind for months on end. Maybe because she had decided not to dwell there. She was doing something psychologists now recognize as critical to survival. She was controlling what she focused on. Not the what-ifs, not the dead men, just what is the next task. She developed a strict routine: wake at dawn, check the traps, hunt if weather permitted, cook, repair clothes, maintain the hut, write in the journal, sleep, wake at dawn, repeat. Structure was survival. Months passed. No ship. She didn't know it, but back in Canada, Stephenson was slow-walking the rescue effort, wrapped up in politics, money, and protecting his own reputation from the disaster he had caused. By the time summer came to Wrangel Island in 1923, Ada had been alone for 3 months. Her ammunition was nearly gone. Her food stores were critically low. She was running out of time. But Ada herself was not deteriorating. Remarkably, she was sharper than she had been at any point in the expedition. She had become genuinely skilled at surviving in the Arctic. She was also, remarkably, healthy. While Knight had died of scurvy, Ada had managed to maintain her own nutrition, partly through the fox and seal meat, and partly through instincts about what her body needed that she couldn't have explained scientifically, but that kept her alive. She no longer flinched at polar bears. She tracked them, understood their patterns, and made herself visible enough that they recognized her as not prey. Fear had become something she could work with, rather than something that worked against her. She had arrived on Wrangel Island as the least experienced person in the group. She was leaving, if she got to leave, as the only one who had actually figured out how to live there. August 19, 1923. Ada was doing her daily rounds near the shore when she saw it. A dark shape on the horizon, moving. She grabbed her binoculars. It took several seconds for her eyes to process what she was seeing. A ship. An actual ship, flying a Canadian flag, cutting through the ice toward Wrangel Island. She lit a signal fire. She ran to the highest point she could reach. She waved everything she had, a blanket, her coat, anything visible. The ship saw the signal and turned toward the island. On August 20, 1923, the rescue ship Donaldson sent a small boat to shore, and there was Ada Blackjack, alone, thin but standing. 4 months and 27 days after Knight died, nearly 2 years after she had arrived. The crew member Harold Noyce wrote in his diary that night, "She is the most remarkable woman I have ever encountered in my life. She survived alone, and she did not break." When they brought her aboard the ship, the crew didn't know what to do with her. They had expected, perhaps, to find wreckage, bodies, despair. Instead, they found a woman who was ready to go home. Ada returned to Nome, Alaska. She had been gone for nearly 2 years. Bennett, her son, the reason she had gone in the first place, had survived his illness. He was waiting for her. The press went wild. She was called the female Robinson Crusoe. Feature articles were written. Reporters lined up. Ada did a few interviews, and then largely stepped back from all of it. When asked what it was like to survive alone in the Arctic for so long, Ada reportedly said, "I just did what I had to do. I had my boy to come back to." She received no pension, no government recognition, no medal for what she had done. The men who organized the disastrous expedition, including Stefansson, who had never set foot on the island, were treated as the story. Ada sued the expedition organizer for the wages she was owed. She won, and then she went home and got on with her life. She did not spend years being bitter. She didn't have time for that. Ada Blackjack lived the rest of her life quietly in Alaska. She raised Bennett. She sewed. She did not give many interviews. She did not write a book. She did not seek fame. She died in 1983, age 85. For most of her life, almost no one outside Alaska knew her name. A book published in 2003 finally told her story to the wider world. 80 years after she walked off that island alive. What Ada Blackjack did is not just a survival story. It is a story about what happens when someone with no training, no backup, and no one watching decides to just keep going. She never claimed to be special, but the evidence suggests otherwise. When everything was stripped away, the help, the tools, the people, the hope, Ada Blackjack had something that kept going. Call it what you want. She never put a name to it. Day after day, trap after trap, entry after entry in a journal no one might ever read. She did the next thing, then the next, then the next. A seamstress from Nome, Alaska, the sole survivor of the Wrangel Island expedition of 1921. One of the most remarkable people you've almost certainly never heard of, until now.